Hey everybody, Andrea Fair here with Flying Free Ministries. I'm so glad you joined us today because I am here with one of my very good friends, Brenda Haire. She is also an author. We actually met at our publishers conference. Oh, how many years ago now? Three-ish? I don't know.
Three.
Anyhow, three? Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a funny story, so I'm going to tell it. I had only had to carry on and I was all proud of myself and I put my hair product in my little Ziploc bag and then I was like super duper running low and it was not cool. And so I found a fellow curly head and I was like, hey, so anyways, we talked about hair, we talked about everything and now we keep on talking and it's been awesome. This is Brenda's book, Save the Butter Tubs. It's Discover Your Worth in a Disposable World. And by the number of dog-eared corners, which is what I do to mark my book so I can find the great quotes, it is a must read. So be encouraged and you can snag it off of Brenda's website as well as off Amazon. So we'll have those links for you later. And
Mhm.
Brenda, we are so happy that you are here. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I
Well,
love that God connected our curly hair and that who knew that we would be such deep soul sisters 3 years later. So I
totally.
love it.
And I think that even at that conference, it was at that conference that we started talking about our health stuff because I
Mhm.
remember us both just being like, what? We have similar issues and that is so weird. And obviously we're both put together and at the conference and doing as best we could. But that is part of what is brought us here to this day because I'm like, wait a minute, Brenda does so much with so many people and yet she works with a chronic illness or genetic disorder that she works with. And so I'm just excited for what you have to share with us in this Freedom During Chronic Illness interview. So let's get started. When did your journey
Yes.
begin with chronic illness?
Well, my two, I guess three really big chronic illness, I don't really call them that. We've kind of talked about that in the past, but they're gene mutations, and or it's hereditary disorder. So one of them is called neurocardiogenic syncope. If you break that down, it means your head and your heart don't communicate very well, so you faint, and it is genetic. So that was my first experience. I was 16 the first time I fainted. And my mom knew exactly what to do because she had the disorder. I first experienced her fainting when I was about 9, and saw her on the bathroom floor, thought she was dying. It was really horrible. Called 911, and then she's like, no, hang up. When she came to, she's like, hang up. They don't need to come. I'm fine. Which is funny, because everybody panics when someone passes out. But it's true for the most part. We don't need to go to the hospital. We just need to lay flat or elevate our legs. And so, those are things you learn along the way. But it's been interesting because I remember right after it happened, the first time I ever fainted, we were at a parade. We were in, at the time we lived in San Antonio, Texas. So it was, I'm sure, hot. It was May. It was their traditional fiesta parade. And we were watching the parade, and I just remember not feeling well. And I squatted down. And again, I was 16. And I squatted down. And my mom said, are you okay? And when I looked up at her, she must have seen it in my face because she just grabbed my arm and took me into this McDonald's that was there, right? We were like in front of the McDonald's standing on the street watching this parade. And she took me in, and I remember in my mind, I guess because I wanted to sit down so badly, everybody was offering me a seat in my mind. Like she could sit here, she could sit. That was what was happening. But when I told my mom that later, she's like, no, honey, no one offered you a seat. And I was like, really? So I guess I really wanted to sit. And then that was really humiliating. I was 16 and I actually woke up from fainting, because I actually did faint, by urinating on myself, which is always pleasant when you're 16 and you're like, oh, that was what's just happened. And so the McDonald's that we were at was so nice. It was a 2-story little thing downtown. And so they let us go upstairs and have the whole upstairs to ourselves. And so my mom was able to wash my skirt out in the sink and, all that kind of stuff. But and they brought us juice, and everybody thinks it's a blood sugar thing, right? And really it has nothing to do with blood sugar. It has to do with the fact that your head and your heart don't talk like they should. So your blood pressure isn't properly regulated. And so just learning your triggers is really important. But that was my first experience. And then my mom made me carry a note in my pocket. Back then, I guess we didn't have, like now I have a road ID bracelet or whatever. But back then she was like, just carry this note. And it said, if I faint, call my mom. And it had her phone number. And she said, always make sure, I think it was a dime back then, maybe to use the payphone. And she's like, always carry a dime and this, note in your pocket. So that was my first experience.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was when you were 16, hey? And then the other two conditions kind of revealed themselves as you've gone along, or?
Yeah. So I actually wasn't diagnosed with the fainting disorder until I met and married my husband, my current husband. He actually works for a cardiologist. He is implants pacemakers and defibrillators. And so the first time I ever fainted in front of him, because, you don't necessarily think to tell people, like when you meet them, hey, by the way, I have this disorder, I do now sometimes when I think I might faint in front of people. I'm like, by the way, if I do, like my hairdresser knows, my boss knows, those kind of things. But when I first met my husband, I fainted in church. And right after it happened, he's like, you're going to the cardiologist. You have neurocardiogenic syncope. And I was like, what? Slow down. What did you just say? Say it really slow. Like, I have no idea what you just said. And he basically explained it just like I did. It's neurocardiogenic syncope. Your head and your heart don't talk and you faint. And so sure enough, I went to the doctor, started rehashing all the times that I had fainted prior to that. And he said, you're a textbook case. And I can either put you on a tilt table test and we can have that fun experience, or you can just leave with my advice. And I said, I'll leave with your advice, because for me, fainting, going all the way out is really horrible. It's usually a 3 to 5 day recovery after that. After my last fainting spell I had the last time I fully went out was in 2016. My husband says I still haven't recovered from that, which is kind of a running joke. But my other two disorders, they are gene mutations. So they're hereditary as well. And it's called factor V laden and factor II. And factor V basically means your blood is stickier than normal people's blood. And factor II means you have more protein in your blood than, there's a special word, I can't think of it right now, fibrin. There's more fibrin in your blood than other people. And so it causes you to form more blood clots than normal people. So my mom has it, and she had her first stroke before the age of 55. And she was diagnosed with it at that time, but she didn't really tell us anything about that it was genetic or anything like that until in 2015, she was diagnosed with colon cancer. And then after her surgery, had a clot in her small intestines and ended up losing her small intestines. And then right around that same time is when I had my last fainting spell. And she said, you have got to be tested. If you have the fainting disorder like I do, you probably have these other things. And I said, well, we don't even know what it's called. What is it that you even have, Mom? And so we kind of discussed it and researched it. And I said, okay, I'll be tested. And sure enough, I have it, and my youngest daughter has it. So it's very, it is what it is. You can't change it. It's a gene mutation. So yeah, there you go.
Wow. Which actually leads us into the next question of what kind of helped you come to acceptance of the different conditions that you have? Was there a specific person, kind of events, or?
I think, funny enough, when I had Lyme disease, and it happened around the same time, it helped me really understand that I'm not in control of even my own health, as much as we think we'd like to be. And so it was the summer of spring break 2016. I came down with Lyme disease and suffered for a 30-day period. Praise God, healed from it. The story is actually in the book because it was a life-changing moment for me, and really wrestled with what is happening here, God. Like, I can't function, and I thought I had a plan, and he's like, yeah, we had a plan, and you're not listening. And so that really kind of woke me up to the fact that we're not in control of as much as we think we are, even our health. And it is what it is. Like, I just have to deal with it the best way I can. So a lot of it's leaning on God for prayer. I love that you have, I don't know if you've shared with your audience, but you have a similar disorder. And so you understand that feeling of, second guessing everything. Now when I stand in church, if I have a certain feeling or I'm a little warm, I'll think, am I going, is it happening? And so that questioning all the time is really, the only way I can deal with it is really just praying through it and saying, okay, God, especially when I'm in church, I'm like, I'm worshiping you right now. I really don't want to fall over. Like,
could you just make it
can
work?
we just not do this right now? And, and it has happened more than once in church, which is really embarrassing, but it's standing as a trigger for me. So, yeah, it's coming to grips with it and realizing that we're really just, I think I shared with you when we were talking about setting up for this interview, that I'm really right now with everybody saying, with COVID happening and we're in this crisis and everybody's these uncertain times. Oh, we're in these uncertain times. And I'm just like, I live in uncertain times. Every day is uncertain for me. I don't know if I'm going to wake up with a blood clot or not wake up because of a blood clot, or wake up and have a fainting disorder day. You just don't know. And so just having to rely fully on him and trust him. And so, yeah, that's how I deal with it pretty much. And then, try to avoid the triggers and those kind of things.
For sure. Yeah. And did you have a season within that time where you were just like, okay, God, not cool. Forget it. Like, did you have a fight with him? Please tell me you fought with him, because I have. But what is your story with it?
Yeah, I think it's almost, it's kind of sometimes it's daily, like when you don't have the energy to go do the things you want to do, or when you need to rest more than other people. For instance, last weekend, my daughter and her son came to, or her husband came to visit and spent the weekend with us for like 4 days. It was wonderful, but it's exhausting for me. Then this coming up weekend is a 3-day weekend. So my husband's planning. And I'm like, no, I need a break. And then, so those, the kind of things really bring up the, cause I do work full time in between, right? So I'm working full time, and just took on a new position. So there's a lot of new things happening, and it's just like, okay, I need a break. I just need to rest and close my eyes and not think and function, and just literally let my body rest and heal. And so those days I still wrestle. I'm like, God, really? I want to go do this, this, and this. And he's like, no, you're going to lay down, because if not, you're not going to be able to, function. And so I still have those days when I still wrestle with those kind of things, but I just think, okay, you're in control and you're probably right. I don't need to go do those things, or, I probably do need to just sit in your presence. And so, yeah, I still have him, but he brings me back around, and which is good.
He's
Yeah.
very good at that. I love that you're honest about that. It's like actually a daily thing, or often thing, versus like, yeah, one moment and I can accept this, no problem, let's do it. It's like, yeah, no, when you really, really want to go on that bike ride and you don't get to, or when you've been working all week towards that fun thing and then you pass out right before, and then it's like, oh, that's great, now I'm out for 4 days. And it's like, it's hard to accept on the fly. So
Yes.
you're honest.
Yeah. And I think the older I get, the worse the disorder gets. And so the triggers have increased, and the recovery time is worse. And so, like, I used to love dancing all the time, especially with my kids. We were from Texas, so we country western dance, and we would spin around the dance floor, and I can't do it anymore. Like, it just makes me nauseous, and I can't do it. And it's like, oh, that really stinks. Like, that was something I really enjoyed in my life. But it's probably good. Maybe God's saying, well, that's, my kids are grown. I'm an empty nester now. So he's like, that part of your life's over, move along. So sometimes we just have to come to grips with the things we can or can't do, but it is a daily thing. I mean, for me, it's almost every morning when I first open my eyes, it's like, okay, how do I feel today? It's always assessing.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the days I can just get right out of bed and go, great. And then there's days that I'm like, oh, am I gonna, but it's an everyday assessment.
I can relate to that for sure. Yeah. Wondering if this is, or you think, I have so many days where I got out of bed and be like, I think I can do today, but that was before I got up. And then I get up and be like, holy crow. It's like, or not, or what? But it's a real thing. And it's hard when you're measuring your day with, well, for me it was like steps, or standing, or those kind of things were triggers too. So it's like, I can't do that because of this. And it's just hard for us to accept. But then when we have to like share that with someone else that loves us and is frustrated too, then it can be not a super fun time for either. But definitely you
yeah.
as you
And
go.
then Yeah. And then now I'm experiencing, so in my family, we go through menopause kind of early, and sorry for the men in the room, but we go through, and so I'm starting to experience hot flashes and those kind of, hormonal changes. And so it's a whole new cycle of issues, right? Because then it's like, oh, I'm having a hot flash, or I'm about to faint, because the sweats are the same. So like, are these hot sweats or cold sweats? What's happening? So it's just, I feel like I'm constantly assessing my own body's, even down to the point, because it is called an autonomic disorder. And so it's part of the things that are supposed to happen normally in your body that don't. And another one of them for me is breathing, which I know sounds crazy to people, but there's often times that I will hold my breath when I don't even realize it. It used to be walking upstairs. So if I was walking upstairs, I would hold my breath. And then at the top of the stairs, I'd be, huffing and puffing, trying to catch my breath. And then I realized, oh, you're holding your breath, dummy. Like, so when I walk up the stairs, I have to really think, breathe in, breathe out, and there's just different times I find myself doing it. And they're funny, sometimes my husband's like, you're doing it. Cause I cut his hair cause he's bald. And so I shave his head. And when I'm doing that, he's like, why are you breathing so hard? And I'm like, cause I'm holding my breath, and then I'm catching my breath, and then, cause I'm concentrating, and it's just so bizarre, but yeah. The things that people don't realize we go through on a regular basis.
That's right. Yeah. And your body awareness is so loud compared to other people who don't necessarily aren't aware that, oh yeah, when I drink that Coke, I feel sick afterwards. Whereas we're like, that I can't do that. I can't do that. I need to do that. I better not do that. I really want to do. So always assessing.
Exactly.
I heard recently a saying, your breaking point is your breakthrough point. Does that make sense for you in your journey, or what do you think?
I think so, because I think my experience with Lyme disease was my breaking point.
Okay.
I had gone through an experiences before where I thought, okay, I'm a control freak and I know God's trying to correct me. But that one really laid it all out that I am not in control of anything. Like people think, oh, I'm going to work out, I'm going to eat right, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to run, I'm going to, not have this in my house or that in my, everything's going to be perfect and pure, and my life's going to be perfect. And then God says, oh no, by the way, you have this gene, or this, or a bug's going to bite you and change your whole life. And so that was really a turning point for me, when I was like, I'm really not in control of anything. Like, I just need to, basically how we react is that's the only thing we're in control of, how we react to things. And it really depends on who you are, if that's even the situation, right? Some people can't even control their reactions because they have other gene mutations that cause them to, Tourette's and things like that. They can't even control their reactions to things. So there's really just not. So that was really my breaking point, I would say, because I thought, I can't continue. If I would have stayed with that Lyme, and there's people who have Lyme disease now that aren't cured, that have had it for years, and it's debilitating. I don't know that I could have kept functioning at all had I not been cured from it. So, I mean, I was pretty much on bed rest for 30 days. So that was a big, huge breaking point for me, and turning point for me, that I just realized that on my good days, I'm going to do everything I can do, because I know the bad days are coming.
Okay. Yeah. So the choice of, in this moment, this is what I can do, therefore I will. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really living life to the fullest on the good days, right? And not just, there's days obviously that you want to have downtime and relax or whatever, but making that a decision and not just a default,
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that is something I think about. Yeah. Because there is the reality of, there is lag times in the day, or times when you're bored, or you just really don't want to go back to your office, especially for us that work at home. It's like, do I have to go back down there? But yeah, you get to pick, right? The default, or is it actually resting?
Yeah.
So
And it really changes the way you procrastinate too, because you realize that if I procrastinate this and I'm having good days, and then the deadline comes and that happens to be a bad day, then what are you going to do?
right.
So yeah, learning not to procrastinate, because you don't know if when the deadline comes, is it going to be a good day or a bad day? And then you're cramming. Yeah. Because on bad days, there's no cramming, right? There's no functioning really.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you work with that? Like, that's a lot of pressure, right? Like, so with all the assessing that you're doing and all the navigating of the many symptoms, do you have something built into your week or day that is your like your touchstone or your stopping spot, or your okay, I am regrouping on this day in this way, or do you just kind of do it as it happens?
Unfortunately, I kind of do it as it happens. But I'm to the point now in my life where I know, like, I'm at my limit. Um, and I plan. So like, even when I'm traveling or things like that, I know that when I come back, I can't have a major thing happening right then because I'm going to need time to recover from that. And so it's just that it's a lot of people, like I know the fibromyalgia community talks about spoons, and you only have so many spoons, and once you're out of spoons, you're out. And some people can probably relate to this. It's kind of the same thing. Like once you're out of the, you have to plan. You only have so much energy, and once you're out of it, you're out of it. Like there's no working on half done. So on a regular basis, I should probably get better at scheduling in time. And I just took a new position, and that's been a little bit harder because I almost feel like I need to schedule time to do my work because I sit in a lot of meetings, and then I don't have time to get the work done. And then I'm trying to work, after hours and on the weekends and things like that to make up. And I'm like, I can't function that way. And so knowing that is really beneficial, but actually making it happen is a must, right? We have to set that time aside. And so there's times that I will just literally walk out of my office and be like, I'm going to lunch for an hour, even though I work from home. And even though, like I'm going to go to lunch in my kitchen for an hour, like I would if I worked outside the home. I'm going to leave my house, but it's leaving my office, sitting in the other room, and actually relaxing and doing something different besides checking email and those kind of things for an hour. So just knowing it and trying to fit it in. I know I remember one of your sweet gestures at conference. I think it was our second conference. It might have been that first conference after we had chatted about our issues. And I remember when I had left the room because I wasn't feeling very well and had left the room. And you came over and asked, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Not really." And you said, "Let's go outside and just," and I remember that. And when you laid down on the ground and I laid down on the park bench and we just chatted and just
Like our shoes
fresh
off.
air. And it was such a sweet moment because it was like, oh, somebody gets it that I just can't sit in this room and with all these lights blinking and all this noise and all this stuff all day long. And so it was really nice just to be able to say, I'm not alone in this world, in this crazy disorder in my brain, and I get to go, relax. But just having that moment where you can go do that. And so knowing it, but I'm not very good at schedules. I don't like schedules. And so for people that are like, oh, I get up every morning and I have my this time and my that time and I have my coffee and I have this and that. Well, I don't even drink coffee, so I'm like, I just hit the ground running, give me some iced tea, and I'm out out the door running. But then I'm like, okay, time to walk away, time to step away. So it's just knowing for me that I've had it and I got to go step away. Right. But now I've got to get better at planning for it because you can't just walk away in the middle of a meeting or something. You have to plan ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like you said, because you know yourself so well, then you also know that, okay, all these lights, or I cannot do 3 Zoom calls in a row or whatever. These are the things that are draining. Therefore, this is how I need to set up my schedule and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting? Our church just got a new lighted background stage, like during this time that they've been closed, they've been remodeling. And they posted it on Facebook that they just got this new background, and the lights apparently changed colors, and they had it on the changing thing. And I was like, oh, one more thing to think about. I'm like, guess we're moving to the back row, far away from the lights. Because it is, all those little triggers and things. So yeah, it is about knowing yourself and planning it out, I think, for sure.
Yeah. And to take the stop when it's stop time, like you said about the spoons. Like I how many billions of times could tell a fatigue attack was coming, and I'm like, I'm just going to power through. Or I knew that my body was like, you need to sit. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to force my head to communicate with my heart just for 2 more minutes because I want to finish this. And it's never worth it. But so to learn the stop,
it's not.
Forever the challenge.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
This is the next question. It's a loaded one. When would you say that you were able to enjoy freedom despite your conditions? And what brought that about?
Well, that's things. So freedom is the more free I feel, but it also can backfire, right? Because not everybody understands. And so you're communicating and then people are like, oh, she's just complaining about her health again, or, those kind of things. But really helping those closest to you understand, like, there's times I have to tell my husband, like, that's too much. You can't plan a 7-hour hike every day on our vacation. Like, that can't happen for me. I need a rest day in between, like getting him to understand. But because I've fainted in front of him enough times and, had the down days, he doesn't want that. So he's like, okay, yep, no problem. He gets it more. And even we walk on a regular basis in our neighborhood. We walk, 2 to 4 miles. And if I'm out and it's hot, I don't do well in the heat. That's another trigger for me, which is crazy that I was born in Texas, live in Texas. But if it's hot, I'll say, I think I'm going to go in. I'm not feeling it. And I don't, because it's just an instant drain on me. And he'll be like, okay, I'm going to go a couple more miles or whatever. Or he'll say, well, I got enough steps at work today. I'm good. I'll come in. But just him knowing and not making me feel guilty for it, so the communication is really helpful. You are a big part of that. I mean, just connecting with somebody else who has, like, physically connecting besides my mom, connecting with somebody who has it and understands it. It's life-changing. So, I think finding those connections and finding people who you can trust to talk about it, who it's not just going to be like, I don't want to just have a whining session about it. I don't want to just sit around and have a pity party, but it's nice to say, oh, do you ever get that feeling? And they're like, oh yeah. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. It's just good to feel like I'm not alone and that somebody understands it. So yeah, yep. I think I'm moving in the right direction as far as communication with most people. Most people know I laid out there pretty much up front. I have had an experience like in the shampoo bowl before at the hairdresser where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to get up from this shampoo bowl. And it's not good. And had to literally lay down on the couch at the hairdresser for like an hour before I could drive home. And so knowing that, and just being able to have that communication with people in your life that you're like, okay, this might happen when I come get my hair done. So just FYI, if it does, this is what you need to do to me. And they're like, okay. Because first thing people want to do, just like I did when I was a little kid, and they want to call the ambulance soon, it's like, nope, I don't need an ambulance. I'll be fine. Yeah. Or they want to force sugar in your mouth. And I'm like, I don't need any of that either.
Yep. They want to know. Yeah. Be some air for me. Yeah. They want to that is, yeah, well, I hear what you're saying. There's freedom in being able to explain it a bit to others or having people get on board with you. So you're not just feeling like you're alone in it or that people won't accept what your triggers are. Like I remember not communicating because I felt bad that I was with Calvin at the banquet. So I better not say anything. And then all of a sudden he's carrying me out of the thing because I'm slumped over and I'm like, oh, so eventually he got annoyed enough to be like, you have like, tell me when you tell me. And then we had to work out the actual exiting at the right time because you know how it goes. You still would wait too long to tell, and then there's the after chat before that. It's like we got better, but it didn't. It took practice and
it's still that weird feeling dynamic, right? But you had done a coaching training, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now. I think it was right before your book came out, about triggers and there was more triggers about just what robs us of our freedom as a whole. And it was incredible, the different, like just to apply that to this, to know that those triggers apply to everything in your life, just knowing what triggers rob you of your freedom. And so that training you did was really helpful too, because then it was like, okay, it's not just triggers, emotional triggers or things that just rob me of my everyday joy, but what's robbing me of my freedom across the board. And so it helps you in this kind of instance make better health choices. Should I have one more cup of caffeine if I really don't need it, or should I drink more water? Or I also have another gene mutation where I can't ingest B6 unless it's in its natural state. So I can't do any like energy drinks or protein bars or anything of that processed kind of stuff. And so that just knowing those things and that is a trigger and that could really hurt me, then it helps you make the decisions, right? And so I think freedom comes down from having the choice. And the more we can choose the right things, which communication would be the right thing, I think the better we are. So yeah, if people need help identifying their triggers, they should definitely talk to you, because you were very helpful in that.
Well, the things you learn, I know. And it's funny how, yeah, when God's like, yeah, write a book on freedom. And I'm like, what? I was still in the throes of my chronic illness. Like I hadn't gotten the healing yet. And yeah. And then as I slowed down, I was like, oh yeah, he has been totally teaching me how to have freedom, even though, yeah, this thing could go off at any time and you don't know when and you know what the triggers are, but they also change this
Yeah.
fast, right? Wow. Cool. So is there anybody, what would you like to say to someone who's just like doesn't know what's going on with them and they're waiting to be diagnosed? Like, do you have any ideas of what I don't know, any advice?
Well, I know my doctor would probably say, don't get on the internet. But I actually would say, um, educate yourself, get on the internet and start trying to put some of the pieces together. There's so many variables out there and different things. I mean, if you Googled your symptoms, we all have cancer probably, right? Because that's, that's what it all, when you Google it, it's like, yep, all these things means you have cancer. Like, no. But doing the research, and trying to find out, because ultimately you want to educate yourself whether you have a diagnosis or not.
Mhm.
That's been really helpful. Even, now knowing that my daughter she has the fainting disorder and she has the blood clot disorder, helping her understand and educating her has been huge. And so I would say, educating yourself, especially if you're like, okay, I've fainted, or I have this problem going on. Who else do I know that has this? Or can I start looking around? One of my favorite places to be is, I'm actually in a Facebook group for people that have both, the factor 5 and, not that people have both, but I'm in two different groups, um, for the neurocardiogenic syncope and the factor 5. And it may sound really horrible of me to say this, but it's actually really encouraging to me that I'm not on all the medication that they're on, because so many people in the group, they're like, well, I'm taking this medication. What are the side effects you've experienced? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, praise God, I'm not on that medication. And so it's been encouraging me to see like how bad the disorder can go in one way. But then it's also been encouraging me to help people, start identifying their triggers or this, that, and the other. So being in a group and connecting that way would be a good thing. Even when my mom was first diagnosed with colon cancer, my sister and I first went to Facebook groups and like, who has this? How do you deal with it? What do you do? Like, what happens if she gets an ostomy bag? What happens if this? And that's been really helpful. I mean, even talking about in that group specifically, for my mom, what kind of glue they use to stick the bag on and these different kind of things. I mean, that's huge. It's not like people are out on the street talking about those kind of things, the same with us. They're not out talking about, in the book clubs, they're not sitting there saying, oh, how was the book reading? Oh, it's great. And by the way, did you faint yesterday? People aren't talking about those things. And so to be in a group of people who understand it, it's huge. But prior to diagnosis, you just kind of got to do your homework a little bit and see, and I would say journaling your symptoms is good. Seeing if they're cyclical. So I have an app on my phone for my menstrual cycle, and the app allows you to put notes in. And so recently, I guess it was about a year ago, I was having really bad headaches, and it turned out that they were hormonal related. It was happening cyclical. And so I think that that's really helpful for people to start documenting the symptoms and when they're happening, what they ate or didn't eat, or, what they did, what activities, those kind of things, because depending on what the chronic illness is, could be related to some of those activities and triggers and things like that. So journaling ahead of time is great. And then just doing your homework.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I took forever to get on the journal wagon, but man, it would have saved me. Anyway, Lord knows, God forgive myself, but it's another thing, and it feels overwhelming. But at the same time, it's like actually, later it became empowering, because then I could look back and be like, oh man, I actually did have 3 days that were good in a row. I haven't actually been in bed all week, like and different things or eventually I did see the cycle pattern in my own health stuff, and could go to my doctor and be like, here's the deal, man, these symptoms we can control this way because they happen each month. And so he's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, why did we not do this? But anyway, and
Yeah, it's really, really helpful.
yeah. Well, and from your
Yeah.
I mean, even for the sanity level of wondering if you're going crazy or if this is just all in your head, like I know those were thoughts I had, especially in the first
Mhm.
years. And so to have the evidence of like, well, actually, this is the reality of what happened. And I think
Yeah.
another thing might be to, I just from your own story, because it was hereditary, right? So to be bugging our parents and say, should I know anything about, like, did great Aunt Thelma have something going on? Like, I think she passed
Yeah.
out at the gathering one. But
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like my sister, she was never one to go to the doctor and stuff like that. She's kind of one of those like, I'm just gonna, live my life. And we encouraged her to go and have her first colonoscopy after my mom was diagnosed and things like that. It's like you need to go find out about these things because it's important to know, especially when there's family history so associated with some of those things. And so I think it is important to, if you're feeling bad all the time, journaling is huge. I think it also helps you get it out of your head. Like you said, sometimes you feel like, am I just thinking too much about this? And so writing it out and then seeing the good days over the bad days is huge. Seeing like, oh, wait, I actually I can look back now because I know 2016 was the last time I fully went out, fainted, that was the last time. 2016, that's 4 years ago. Like, yay. Unfortunately I had a vertigo incident in the middle of that took me to the hospital, but ideally, I did not faint in church from 4 years. That's huge.
celebrate that.
Yes, I'm going to celebrate that for sure. And I think that tracking that is good to celebrate the victories as much as get all the emotions out of your head, because it is very emotional. Like who walks around like constantly assessing their every, like if I have a pain in my calf, I'm like, oh gosh, let me feel it. Is it swollen? Is it, do I have a clot? If I have a pain in my chest, I'm like, oh, let's breathe. Is that a blood clot? Am I, not people don't assess those things that, they don't live that way. And so I think it's important for us to have a place to vent it and journal it and just kind of get those thoughts out. Most of the time that turns into a prayer at the end of it for me. I'll write how I'm feeling and then I'll turn it into a prayer. But I think it's important to have an outlet.
Definitely.
For sure.
And that leads us into, we're just wrapping up here, but for those who are feeling tired of the daily battle, to make sure that they have an outlet, right? Whether it's a Facebook group or journaling and even, I love how you said that it usually turns into a prayer because it's just a lot like the Psalms, right? Like they just, and at the end, I will trust you, God. I'm like, yep, I can relate to you, buddy. You and me can write the same things.
Exactly. It so much is. And feeling tired of it, I think it's a natural feeling. I mean, nobody wants to feel, especially if it's chronic pain. I mean, how much pain can you take, right? And I know people suffer with that all the time. So I think even those things have triggers, and finding out what those are and finding alternate ways of healing those things or dealing with those things, even if they can't be healed. I use traditional medicine, but I also use essential oils. I use, for me, essential oils, I use them more probably for emotional support than almost anything else. But taking the right supplements, feeding your body what it should, I think just not thinking about it so much and focusing on the good things is so important. I mean, if I sat around and just thought about, oh my gosh, I could get a blood clot, and how big would it be, and what would it do, and what happens if it's in my brain over here and I have a stroke over here, or what happened? I could sit and analyze the whole thing, just wear myself plumb out. But I choose not to. I choose to focus on the good things, and I think that part of it is that no matter how tired we get, we can still find something. Like my bed is so comfortable, like just focus on the comfort of your bed, or which I'm excited. I ordered a cooling weighted blanket. I'm not sure if the weighted blanket is a good thing for my blood disorder or not, but I'm going to try it out because it's a cooling blanket and it's supposed to help you really get some good sleep. So I'm excited to try it and see if it works, but finding those little things, to help you through the just mundane of it, and because it is draining, just to think about assessing your every feeling and all the time. It can be really draining. And so I think you just need to find little pieces of hope here and there.
Yeah.
And whether that's reaching out to a friend, joining a Facebook group, journaling, finding a treat that's healthy, and treating yourself to something that's healthy. my number one treat is a massage. So, yeah, number one, cannot wait. Getting one next 2 weeks from now. Yeah, but just finding those little triggers, I think it helps get through the tiredness and the just mundane of it. And having a good support system, right? Because there is a point where you just can't even get out of bed sometimes. And you're just like, I can't function. I just need to rest and be in bed. And so somebody needs to bring you electrolytes and food and, like you need some good beverages and some water. And so I think just getting a good support system is really helpful too, and helping people understand that, this is how I feel and I don't want to feel this way, but this is how I currently feel and can't do anything about it right now, but I'm working through it.
Yep.
So I think that that's good because it is tiring to think about it all.
For sure, for sure. So our last question here is, can you see any gifts you've received through this journey with your conditions? And I think I could pick out a couple from what you said, but I'll see if you
Absolutely. Well, my number one gift obviously is it's brought me closer to my creator. Um, I was a believer before, not before I was first diagnosed, not when I was 16, but before the blood clotting disorder, before I had Lyme disease, all of that, I was a believer. But going through all of these things, it draws me closer. I mean, I have to rely on him. I'm not in control. But specifically a gift, I mean, and I share this in my book as well, the gift of my book and the whole message behind my book. I feel like if I hadn't had Lyme disease and hadn't had that daily battle with God saying, what it's happening here, get me out of this bed. I don't know that I ever would have gotten out of the bed and written the book. And so I would say there has been many gifts along the way. I remember a special time we were at the beach. We were on the Pacific coast and it was my son's spring break. And so I think it was his senior year. And I wasn't feeling well. We had flown there and then I had some kind of sinus infection. So I had this massive head thing going on, and we were there on this beautiful beach, and we were looking for some kind of moonstones or something, the beach there had stones on it. And so I just sat right on the beach and was just like looking in the dirt around, or in the rocks around me. And my son was like, well, let's go down there by the rocks and see. And I did not have the energy. I was like, oh, I just want to sit right here. Like, I'm content. I'm happy. He's like, come on, Mom. And so I went and we saw starfish. And right out of the water, we got to pluck the starfish and see them and hold them. And it was such a gift of sometimes we do want to just sit, and sometimes we can push ourselves a little bit more. And so knowing that balance is really, really good because I wasn't physically harmed by getting up and walking any further or anything like that. And so I think sometimes it's just knowing that balance, and then the gifts God presents the gifts really. So that was a really special time. But ultimately, yeah, my book is huge. That came out of this situation with this. The support of my husband. I mean, when I was diagnosed, I wouldn't have been diagnosed probably if it wasn't for him, because I'd never heard of neurocardiogenic syncope before. And my mom had never been officially diagnosed ever with it. And so still hasn't ever been diagnosed with it officially. And so, she just has it, and her triggers are not fun either. But yeah, so I would say, just those bonds, your friendship, I think is a gift that's come out of this. I don't think we would have connected as well as, we did if we wouldn't have had something to connect over besides curly hair. And it's not like we talked about it for hours or anything either, right? We just were like, yeah, well, we have this. Okay. And just were like, yeah, it's life. Let's talk about it. Yeah. So lots of things come out of it. I think you just have to look for them.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much, Brenda. I think that we've all gleaned a lot from what you've shared, just that we do have choices that we can make, and knowing where we're at is important. And then we get to decide what we do with that, and that there will be gifts along the way, even though the condition doesn't change. And yeah, so thank you so much. And I will for sure share with you guys that information about that Brenda, her website and things like that. And yeah, just blessings on you as you continue and write more books for us, because hello, we need them. So
yeah, you bet. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate you so much.
all right.